Psalms 118 and verse 8. Psalms 118 and verse 8. The Bible says it is better to trust in the Lord than to put confidence in man. You know what that verse is? Psalms 118:8. That is the middle verse of the entire Bible. Boy, count the number of words in that verse.
Okay, I'm not going to be able to remember all this, so I guess I need to. It's Psalm 118 verse 8, not Psalms 118. You don't turn to hymns 118, you turn to hymn 118. And so you go to Psalm 118. You can just... I know some Bible programs were written by people who didn't know that, and so it spits it out wrong, but it's still Psalm 118. And of course, the chapters were introduced during the medieval period, late medieval period, and the verses, at least in the New Testament, 1551. So, as anybody knows, the number of verses is not unless you're actually going to say that there is post-inspirational inspiration. So if you're going to make Robert Estienne in the New Testament, and since he says the middle of the whole Bible, then you would have to be including Robert Estienne's insertion of verses in 1551 in the New Testament. That revelation that takes place 1,500 years after the closing of the apostolic period, or 1,400 years. Obviously, there are many places where it's very apparent that the verse division was arbitrary. Okay, you've got some verses that are very, very long, some verses very, very short. There is really no great consistency in the division of verses. So the point is, it's a human addition to the text of Scripture. It is not to be attributed to the work of the Spirit of God, or it is not theanustos, it is not revelation. So all the adding up of verses, it was right around 1998, somewhere around there, I think. Sometime in the 1990s, there was the big biblical numerology stuff, the Bible code stuff. Remember the Bible code stuff? And there were books being sold and all sorts of stuff like this. And I remember we had a friend on, like, in the FidoNet or something like that. And she got into all this Bible code stuff and just turned against us, and just got really into that Bible code stuff. Anyway, so it comes and goes, and people sell books and then they disappear and stuff like that. But it's if you know anything about the history of the Bible, then just remember both the number of chapters and verses. And by the way, there's Quran codes too. Shabir Ali still promotes them. That amazes me. Just totally amazes me. It does not make a lick of sense why Shabir would take the positions he does on other issues and then would promote Quran codes, the number 19 or whatever else it might be. You can do this with any book as long as you're willing to be inconsistent in how you're handling stuff. You can find stuff anywhere. So this idea that this is the middle verse of the Bible, well, if the horse that Robert Estienne was riding one day while working on 1 Thessalonians happened to jerk at the wrong time, something other than Psalm 118 would be the middle verse of the Bible. So it is, again, if you teach this to your children, then you send them off to university. There's plenty of people sitting around just waiting to tear that to shreds, and appropriately so. Appropriately so.
The middle verse of the Bible. How many are in there? 14. All right, that's right, 14.
Okay, so now you're counting the number of words in the middle verse of the Bible in the King James Version, but not even the 1611 King James Version. Nobody sitting out there is using a 1611. They're using a 1769 Blaney. The 1769 Blaney revision has differences from the 1611. Okay, so you're not, and the 1611 is going to come up here, and the numbers are going to come up here. So, but you're counting English words. Are you counting? Why not count the Hebrew words? Because that's what was written by the psalmist, right? There are only 5 in this verse. There are only 5 Hebrew words. Now, if you wanted to, take off the pronominals and stuff like that, the prefix prepositions, prefix prepositions, whatever, you count them as separate, but there's 5 functional words in the verse translated into 14 English words. So that's what he's talking about now, is he's having people sit there and they're counting up words in their English Bibles. But it has to be the 1769 Blaney revision. And is it the Oxford or the Cambridge? Because that can change things too. Yeah.
So guess what the 2 middle words are in the middle verse of the Bible? The Lord. That's not even the coolest part. How many words are on this side of the Lord and how many words are on this side of the Lord? 6. 6 on this side, 6 on this side, 66. How many books of the Bible are they? 66.
Now, again, why make one 6 a 60 and the other 6 just a single 6? Why not add them together and come up with the 12 apostles? 6 plus 6 is 12. But 66 books of the Bible, as we count them, the Jews didn't count them that way. The minor prophets were considered one book. They counted 22 or 24, depending on what they did with Lamentations and Daniel and stuff like that. But the whole 66 thing is a modern... So to take a 6 and a 6 and put them together and it's 66, again, people can do this with the Book of Mormon, they can do this with the Quran, they can do this with anything, because there's no connection to reality in what it is that you're talking about.
The middle verse of the Bible, the middle words are the Lord, and on this side are 6 words, this side are 6 words. That's 66. Listen, don't tell me a man wrote that book. Are you kidding me?
So the supernatural character of the Bible is demonstrated by the Lord being the middle 2 words in an English translation, in one version of the English translation from 1,500 years after the time of the original writing, in a language that didn't exist during the time of the apostles or prophets. And that proves that the Bible is inspired. How do you even respond to something like that? It's just so foolish.
So the greatest chapter on the Bible, in the Bible, is Psalms 119. Everybody following me?
Psalm 119. Psalm.
So how many verses are in Psalms 119? 176.
And why are there 176? They are 176 because those that divided the 119th Psalm up realized it was an acrostic poem. And it's an acrostic poem based upon the Hebrew alphabet. So if you look at the Hebrew, and I wasn't planning on doing this, but why not? I haven't moved that in this one here. Oh, great. Well, it might work. Psalm 9. So if you look at the Hebrew right here, and I'll let me close this and get this a little bit bigger. There we go. So you'll notice it starts off Aleph, 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 all the way down to here. And then what happens in verse 9? Beit, Beit, Beit. So you go down past the Baits and you get to the Gimels, and there's the Gimels, and every verse starts with the Gimel. And so then you get down past the Gimels, and there's your Dalet, and so on and so forth. And so it is an acrostic poem. And so it's really easy to divide it up based upon the number of the Hebrew alphabet. And that's why you have the number of verses that you have. And at least in this instance, they broke it up properly because those doing it recognized the nature of the underlying original language, which is the important part of that. So anyway.
What are you holding in your lap? The Authorized King James Bible. When was the King James Bible written? Huh? 1611.
No, it wasn't. It was translated by groups of scholars between 1604 and 1611. It took them a number of years. But a number of these texts would have been translated long before 1611. Vast majority were translated long before 1611. So it was published in 1611, but there was a process that brought that about in the year 1611.
Guess what 16 times 11 equals?
Who cares? What does that matter? 16 is the century. 11 is the years in the century. There's no relevance. Why didn't you multiply 1 times 6 times 1 times 1? That's just 6. I mean, how about 161 times 1? 611 times 1. It's just
176. How many verses were in Psalms 119? What's 16 times 11? When was your King James Bible written? 176. No. 1611. Coincidence? You can listen. If you want to think that's coincidence, that's fine. There's just a whole lot of coincidences in your King James Bible. Hey, listen. I didn't get this overnight. You just got to read. Start in Genesis. Whoop, that's how much I think about it. Start in Genesis. Go to Revelation.
Yeah, that's what you got to do. You just got to read. Got to do a lot of studying. Got to do a lot of studying to come up with this. I'm sorry, folks. Yes.
By the way, as the person who does math around here, I just want to let it be known that 6 plus 6 is still just 12.
Right. It's not 66.
There is that.
Yeah.
Just 12. That's all.
Yeah.
It's 12.
It's 12.
Now, if you want to take 12 and 12 times 12, you get 144, and then put some decimal points on it, you could come up with 144,000, and who knows where that could go.
That's
But 6 plus 6 is still 12.
There's much you can do. Much you can do. Many books to write. But on the serious side, like I said, is it really all that difficult to understand? Why you send kids off from a church like that, if that's all they've ever known? Defenseless. Absolutely defenseless. And when we listen, I've listened to a number of things today where various people in the world or even in the church have mocked the concept of inerrancy and inspiration. That's the kind of stuff they're normally mocking. And, people like Sluder are not doing any of us any favors by providing that kind of, and who's that guy? The worst guy, worse than Andrew Sluder, is this Rager guy. I think that's his name, Rager. And that's what he does. He's a big guy. And he thinks sermons are sitting around making strange comments based upon an extremely narrow worldview. It's just, but that's the kind of stuff that people go, see, that's what anybody who believes in inerrancy is like. They're like an Andrew Sluder. They're like a Rager guy. And that's not the case in any way, shape, or form. But that's the stuff that is that's the stuff